Hello, everyone. I'm here with Carmina Amza, one of my favorite card readers, who uses the Cards of Truth's birth card system. And she is starting a new introductory class on the Cards of Truth, something I haven't been able to do to actually have people in a classroom type environment, but she is doing this for us. So I wanted to invite her on my channel so she can talk to you all about exactly what she has planned. So what are you doing?
Hi, Ernst. Thank you for your invitation. Well, the class is a class that I've been teaching over and over since probably 2016. I've been teaching it every year, so I'm quite experienced at it. And what I do is I base it on your videos that you have on your website, but I restructure it in a way that is good for beginners or beginners to intermediate. So people that are very new to the system or people who want to do like a refresher and also to have some practice. And what I like to do is I like to have the sessions live so that I interact with the people and they can ask their questions. And it's structured in 12 classes. And we go over the meanings of the cards, we go over the layout of the Cards of Truth software, the natal spread, the year spread. We also have some introductory notions of astrology, like what are those little numbers there, what the house cusps means, and also what the planets mean in general. So I give them also a little bit of astrology foundation for those who don't know at all. And I introduce as well manual card readings, which are very dear to my heart, like the past life spread, the compatibility spread, and the light on a star spread, which can be very revealing. Like every year, we are just amazed how good these things work along with the Cards of Truth software to pinpoint important events in someone's life.
Yeah, I love this system because it is just so easy to make predictions. It's really, I find it much easier than other systems of astrology to make predictions. And it's a lot easier to learn how to cast cards than to do a prajna, for instance, with astrology. And so I think it's really suitable for people who don't have millions of hours of time to study astrology, and which really is so vast. So for those people who don't know, in the Cards of Truth system, we usually just have how it's normally done, and it goes by different names depending on who's teaching it. We find your birth card based on your birthday, and from that we get a spread of cards. And every one of those cards has a window of time in your year and in your life. Like every card has a 52-day period in your year that we use to predict things. And depending on what that card is, it could be like a three of hearts, a five of diamonds, six of hearts, whatever it is going to let the reader know what to expect during that time in your life. Now, Carmina is going to cover all that, right? And
Yes.
in addition, is unique about the Cards of Truth system that I developed is that with the cards, the different cards, and again, this is common to the system, there'll be a sun card, a moon card, a Mars card, and those cards are based on the signs ruled by those planets. So the Mars card has to do with Scorpio and Aries signs. So what I've done with the system, and which Carmina is also going to introduce to you all, is I see where all the planets are in their signs, and then I see where they fall in the card. So if I have, Venus and Scorpio in the at the time of the birth card spread, it's going to be in the Mars card because Mars rules Scorpio. And what that does, it gives so much more information than the way it's generally been taught before I developed the Cards of Truth system. Because otherwise, you get 52 people, 52 types of people in the world. They all have pretty much the same spread. When we add the planets, now everyone has a completely unique spread, and those planets in the spread, and those house cusps, which Carmina mentioned in the spreads, are going to indicate why you're different than the person born on your birthday in the same year or a year before or 100 years before, which with the older systems of this all have exactly the same spread. And so she'll be introducing you to all those subtleties as well, which is really what makes a system rock.
Yes, and to make a little addition to what you said, indeed, I really love this system. I mean, I also practice astrology and human design, but the cards of truth is super easy to make quick predictions. Like, for instance, I had this lady yesterday, and I just put the chart on, and I saw her. Ecliptic for the year was a seven of spades, and then I looked at in her natal spread she had a seven of spades darakaraka. So I said to her immediately, like, this year something happened with your relationship, either you broke up or you got a new relationship. And she said, yes, I got divorced after 10 years. And then I also saw her K2 card was a four of hearts, so letting go something of the family. So there's so many things that you can play with. You can introduce the Jaimini Karakas that you already introduced in the card software, and you can just juggle around with the different archetypes and the different significators,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
just make light of things that are happening. And it's good, like you said in the beginning, like, it's good for you to know it by yourself without spending millions of hours learning 1,000 astrology techniques. This just goes to the point. Okay, you are 42, let's say it's your Rahu maturation, let's look at your Rahu card. So let's see what the theme is for the year. It's really good at zooming in and making light of
yeah,
practical situations.
yeah. Since I started with that system, I don't do predictions without looking at it with that. And really,
Same.
it's always best in astrologer to use a couple different techniques to hone in on the predictions, especially something that's really critical and important or that has a lot of ambiguities around it, which is so often the case. It's so often it's not clear, they can go either left or right, and
Yes.
it's so hard to decipher. So we regularly, all astrologers, we use a couple techniques to verify the prediction. Okay, this technique makes me think this will happen. Let me verify it with something. And my go-to verification technique, no matter what other technique I'm using, is always the cards, because there's just seems to be less room for ambiguity because you're dealing with processing less data. And with astrology, you start opening up the Vargas and you got so much data, and we've only got, we got so many dashas besides Vimshatri.
Mm.
It's so easy to get inundated by all this data that's overwhelming. And we look at the cards and there's just the data we need. And
Yes.
so, and that also allows it to work great as a standalone. So it really was my dream when I started this system. I said, I hope, this system is for everyone to learn. I said, this is something that can just go widespread. Everyone can learn it. I've never said that about Vedic astrology. Only a few people are going to be able to have the time and dedication, the years of dedication to become competent with Vedic astrology. It's not for everybody. It's just not. It's too big of a world. But the cards, it's just the right size. Anyone who has a love of the occult and of astronomy and astrology can embrace the card system, and using that symbology in such a simple way. Really, in a few months of studying people work, and it was so fun when I started teaching, originally, and you, of course, were right there, one of the first. If we can even say that first, you were right there in the first little group of people I taught this to. And it was so funny to me to see people like you and a couple others just kind of drift away from astrology. It's just like, wow, why should I do all that work? People who are already competent astrologers like you are like, why should I work this hard when I can do a better job just like this with the cards? And it was just so fun to just see people focus. I mean, a few of my students at times just started focusing on the cards. And I say that to illustrate how powerful the cards are. And these were not people who were not capable with Vedic astrology, like yourself. You knew what you were doing with Vedic astrology. It was like, wait a minute. And me too. I remember the year it came into my life, it was just like, whoa, so many questions were answered that I was struggling with. And the cards just spelled it out. And I was like, oh yeah, this is something to run with. So I'm really happy that you're teaching this class because, like I said, it's something that everyone can learn um, without a lot of pain. Everyone can learn and impress themselves and help others. And people, of course, need personal classes, which I, unfortunately, as a primary researcher, don't have the time to have small classes that are more intimate and personal. So it's really always been my hope that people would show up who wanted to do that, who are competent. And so I really appreciate you doing this to help get the cards to people who were just going to flourish with them. So thank you for hosting this class. Again, I know it's been a while since you've done one, so thank you so much.
Thank you for the introduction and for the kind words.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to, oh, yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else you want to tell about it?
I just wanted to say that we start on March 10, but you can check on my website regularly because sometimes I do it twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year. I start the group because it's 12 classes, so it takes about 3 months
Okay.
each class. And then afterwards, we have a practice group. We meet 1 month and 12 times a year. So for those who want to keep going and not forget and keep in the flow of the cards, they can also come to the practice group. So my website is carmina-amza.com for those interested in more information.
Yes, and I will put that down below. Get all that from you, and I'll put that. Another thing I wanted to stress on that you mentioned that you'd be doing was the card casting. And that's when you shuffle a deck of cards. And again, we just use playing cards, which are older than tarot cards. We just shuffle those cards and throw them down and do the reading. And that is such a fantastic system. And really, for those people who are really into Indian culture and Indian old techniques, the ancient Indians had several techniques of casting. Like they would commonly take 108 beads, and they had a few different systems of dividing these beads up, and from those beads arriving at a prediction that could be very specific. So this idea of casting things does exist in India. I've also heard people tell me about a system where, believe it or not, there's some cards and a parrot picks the card and then the reader reads it and it's correct. It's like, wow. So if anyone wonders about this idea of, I just throwing some cards down without your birthday and making predictions, it's a fantastic system to be able to do it. And I always tell people if, my dream, one of my dreams, of course, I got way too many responsibilities. It's just to grab a backpack, put a deck of playing cards in my back pocket, and just wander the earth, and just like do readings. Just wherever you are, you can do a reading. Don't need to ask information, birth time, and it's so powerful. You can help people so much. And I've also said again, I'm emphasizing the importance of the system. If I just wanted to help people, I would just do cards. But I have such a goal of really improving astrology. I'm a researcher, but if my only goal, I like helping people, but if my only goal was to help people, I would not spend this much time studying and researching. I would spend that time helping people. Instead, I'm trying to help people who are deeply involved in astrology, and then they get to help more people because I'm an astrology nerd. But if my only goal was to help people, cards would be mostly what I'd be doing, I think. And that's something I've told people, and I still believe that after years and years. So it's an awesome system, and here's a chance to learn it with someone more in person, where you can ask questions and be a nag, than you're ever going to get with me.
Yes, I very much agree with you. Like you said, the casting is very important because it's also you are in the flow of fate, like you are just in the flow of life and you are trusting life in a way. And trusting life is a Jupiterian thing, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and see,
so
then
for
it's
people who
hosting.
dismiss, I see many people who are a little dismissive with the cards. They're like, oh, do my astrology, like, and I'm just like, let me do my thing and I will tell you what you need to know. You just, trust me because I know what I'm doing.
Yeah,
So
I
I'm
know.
using astrology, a little cards, a little human design, but the cards, I get like shocked results. Even with the manual casting is like, you're breaking up with someone now. Yeah, and you're already with someone else. The mouth is like this.
I know. Yeah.
Yes.
And you do that in 30 seconds versus
Exactly.
half hour of
Yes.
pouring over
Like,
a
why
chart.
do you want to spend half an hour of your reading, when you can get to the point? So that's
Exactly.
like a very, very good, very efficient and very to the point, practical way to find out a little bit about your situation, zoom in and preview like what's going to happen. Are you going to sell that apartment? Like around when is the time? So it's amazing. I'm a fan.
It is. It's a great system. And, astrology, of course, is fantastic.
Of
It's
course.
overwhelmingly huge and it's just more work. And so it's your work to results ratio that really is where the cards dominate. If you have 30 years to study astrology devotedly, yeah, I'd rather go to you than a card reader, if I can afford the cost that you're going to have to charge me after spending 30 years learning all that, of course, it's just the efficiency of the cards. And um, card spreads are great and doing them just in the moment, like you just bump into people. And I remember when I was first learning cards back in tarot cards back in the late 90s. And I would go to bookstore to look at all these cards, and they would have these decks that you could open up and look at. Lots of times I'd bump into someone and just do a reading, just take a deck off the shelf and do a reading for a person right in the bookstore. And it was always just right in the flow, everything working. So it's just a great way. So I really want to advocate to people that, we live in a time right now where Vedic astrology has had this big attention. Vedic astrology is it. It's going to give you the answer. It's the system. And that's true. But that doesn't mean cards aren't equally valuable and useful. It's just a lot less work. And so, you know, I think the cards deserve a lot more attention than they've been getting. And, especially with the birth card system, the cards of truth system. So I hope everyone gives cards a chance and realizes that, okay, I don't have to do Vedic astrology. I can do any system of astrology. And this is an astrology system because we are using planets, we are using your birth time, we are using your birth date, we are using astrological symbolism. But basically, instead of saying Aries, Taurus, Gemini, we're going to look at it in two dimensions. We're going to say the Mars card, which could be Aries. But the beautiful thing about the card system and the reason it works so good is, okay, say you say, oh, they're in Aries, or they got their moon in Taurus, or their moon in Gemini. Well, that's one level of the interpretation. But on top of that, when we look at the card system, in one person's spread, Gemini will relate to the Five of Hearts. In another person's spread, it relates to the Five of Clubs. Now, fives are really busy. They're the ones who get things done. The Five of Hearts person is putting all that moon and Gemini energy into thinking about relationships and their social life, whereas the Five of Clubs Gemini person is putting all the energy into their business projects, their ideas, the work they can do, and being productive. So one person's like having drama over here, and the other person's a workaholic, and they both have the moon in Gemini. And so with the card system, we get we don't just get Aries is always Aries. We get this is the Aries that you are.
Yes.
And sometimes I thought it'd be cool to literally on the birth chart where we have Aries, be able to click on a button and or maybe even
Put the
have the card in the chart to say, oh, there are Five of Clubs Aries. Aries is the
yes.
Five of Clubs is spread, because that level of detail is so it simply
Unique.
adds so much detail to the
Mm.
reality of the person's life. And that's the gift of the cards, is we get this extra symbol that we don't get with Vedic astrology, with just astrology. And that's really the great thing about it. Now, with Vedic astrology, we have the symbols of the signs, yes. And that's the only symbol we're really using. But there's more. We've got the symbols of the Adityas, which I'm working on now. We have the symbols of the Nagas and the Apsaras, which have been totally ignored. Then we have symbols of the Vargas, like the Navamshas has a complete different set of symbols besides Aries, Taurus, and Gemini in the Navamsha. There's Deva, Manusha, and Rakshasha symbols in the Navamsha. So even with Vedic astrology, the astrologer is in the habit of just using Aries, Taurus, Gemini, which is really what Western astrology has, and they only have that. Vedic astrology itself has all these other layers of symbolism for the signs that Vedic astrologers have been ignoring. And the card system, it's not from India as far as we know. Who knows where it's from? But this level of symbology is so useful. And it's important to have this level of symbology on your signs, because just looking at the sign, it's not the whole picture. You need to have another layer of symbology, whether it's the Adityas, the Varga deities, the Varga symbology that's unique and not Aries, Taurus, Gemini Varga symbology. Really see the whole picture. And again, with the cards, it's so easy and
Yes,
so
it's
specific.
more differentiated in a way.
Yes. And the hardest thing about astrology is the differentiation.
Yeah,
The more you differentiate, the more work you have to do.
yes.
The beautiful thing about with the cards is to differentiate, it's you're not even working harder. It's already there. It's already right in front of you. So
Ernst, do you know what the top question I get when people get into this system is like, oh, but I thought my birth card was different because I'm born at whatever hour, because they're used to destiny cards or another
yeah,
system where they're born, after midnight, they're the card from the day after, but whereas we use, equatorial daylight. So that's something that people have a hard time understanding, like why do we use that, and I keep explaining to them, but it's something that they have trouble with. So maybe you can from the
yeah.
from your
So yeah, the modern calendar starts at midnight. So the day starts at midnight. Okay. Um, the advantage of that from a calendar viewpoint is that this day starts at midnight everywhere on the earth. Midnight is the same time. So midnight at the equator is the same as midnight in New York, as long as you're on the same longitude, which means you're in aligned east-west. So New York and a place on the equator directly south of New York will have midnight at the same time. Now, sunrise and sunset are different. Okay, so if we start the calendar at sunrise, then the modern calendar, then all of a sudden New York, January 1st in New York starts a few hours later than January 1st on the equator. And now, okay, do it January 1st. It's like, wait a minute, you said January 1st, and now it's January 2nd. It's still December 31st here. So I'm going to do it tomorrow morning. And we have this 3-hour room window for error, right? Where the days are not coinciding. So the modern calendar starts on the midnight, and that makes sense. The problem with that is the modern calendar does not care about the places north and south of the polar circles. North of the polar circles, midnight happens not once a day, once every 6 months. So if we use the modern calendar system for places north and south of the polar circle, the polar circles, now all of a sudden it's 2023 here, and it's still like zero. It's 50. It's like 1 AD, at the North Pole, right? Or maybe 1 BC. I don't know. It's not remotely close to this. So see, the modern calendar system falls apart above the polar circles. It doesn't really matter for what happens in the world. But when it comes to your birth time, and if it comes to a person, the reality is people are born and do live north of the polar circle. So how do we approach any system of astrology the minute we go north of the polar circle? At that point, most things fail. Like house systems like Koch and Placidus, the two most common house systems, fall apart north and south of the polar circles. They do not work. Yet people use them because they work in the rest of the world, which means they don't work. If it doesn't work globally, it doesn't work. And like, how do you escape astrology? Go north of the polar circle, live in the
yeah.
and I don't have any faith, that's basically what astrology says if out there, if it's not done right. So at the card system, we have the same dilemma. We have midnight, day starts, how do we relate that to north and south? And, to north and south of the polar circle. Same thing with the sunrise dates. Let's say we're going to start the date at sunrise. If we start the day at sunrise, well, still, we only have a new day every 6 months north and south of the polar circle. So that won't work either. See, what people understand is that the globe, the earth, is a symbol of your body, of your astral body, literally, okay? And that whole earth represents you, not where you're born on earth. All where you're born on earth does is it determines the orientation of the houses, which means it orientates the different experiences to the signs. But the signs of the zodiac themselves are all orientated according to Earth. Whereas when the sun is the furthest north, it's right around Cancer. When it's furthest south, it's in Capricorn Aquarius area. When it's on the equator, as in the spring, it's around Aries Taurus area. And when it's around the equator, around the fall, it's in the Libra Scorpio area. So basically, where the sun's rays are coming into Earth is triggering the signs which are in Earth. So in Earth, we have the Cancer Leo up north, the Capricorn Aquarius on bottom. That's the astral body of Earth. And it correlates to our astral body. But that body is rotating like this. The whole body rotates. It's not like the middle of the body rotates and the parts that are north and south of the polar circles do not rotate. And they, for every 365, the middle rotates, the ends only rotate once. No, that's not what's happening. The whole Earth is rotating as a body. And so all these factors that become ambiguous and don't work north and south of the polar circle are meant to be calculated at the equator, which is where the body is the perpendicular to the rotational plane. So what we do with the cards, what I do with the cards is I start the calendar date at the equatorial sunrise, which is really right at 6 a.m. every day, unless you have a DST, okay? And then that equatorial sunrise applies to every point along that longitude. Every point that's directly north and south from each other have sunrise on the same time, whether it's on the equator, New York, or somewhere in the Yucatan north of the polar circle. And now we have a calendar that's not based on sunrise, sunset, really. It's a calendar that's based on the rotations of the Earth. And that's what's really happening is the Earth is rotating in the North and South Pole, just as it is on the equator as one body. And yes, it's getting less sunlight, more sunlight at times, and the houses are all more skewed up there. But now we have something that actually works. So the only thing that can be right is what actually works. And that's the only thing that does work. So I started at sunrise. Yes, I could start it at midnight. I could say, let's just do midnight at the
You have
equatorial.
that setting in your cards. I mean, I think there's a setting there if you want to start the day at midnight, knock
Yeah,
yourself out.
you can do that. But in Vedic astrology, we always start the days at sunrise. And we have all these calculations that need to be done for equatorial sunrise at a specific ancient meridian, which was considered where the clock hands started and finished when it came to the rotation of the Earth, a place called Yamakoti. And Yamakoti means the reigns of Yama, and Yama is a deity that presides over time. So it was the old timeline that was used before in India before Greenwich Mean Time, okay? So this old timeline and other equatorial calculations, we're all directed to do them specifically at sunrise. So when I started doing the cards, of course, one of the first things I did was test, does the card work better at sunrise or does it work better at midnight? And I had better results with sunrise. So I taught at sunrise. If somebody comes from the other system and they don't want to do it that way, fine. They can use it at midnight. I don't have a problem with how anyone does anything as long as they do it better and have better results after they met me than they were getting before they met me, or in this case, before they met you. And afterwards, hopefully they're going to have better results. And the reason people can use midnight if they want to and still get way better results is because they're going to learn how to use the planets in the spread and the house custom in the spread, which is unique to the Cards of Truth system as compared to the Destiny cards, which is a very popular way of reading these cards. And that's going to make you a better card reader. also the meaning of the card spreads, because we have 13 cards in the spread in my system. In some systems, you'll have 7, some 8, and some 9. In my system that Carmina would be teaching, all the meanings of those cards have a true astronomical meaning. They're not made up words like you will find in some of the other systems where the person just says, well, I'm just going to call this card, this sounds good. No, mine have a logical, ordered, astronomically correct, arranged meaning. And those are the results to actually give, because it's based on astronomy instead of, let me see what this sounds good. It's based on astronomy. And again, we have to remember, if it's not astronomically correct, it's not right. Now, we can get away using lots of things that aren't totally right because of our intuition, our ability to get lucky and make good guesses. But we really need to strive to use the most astronomically correct system, which is what I'm always striving for with any system of astrology I touch. So that's the reason. I hope that satisfies everyone. But I don't have a problem if somebody wants to do it at midnight. But if they want me to look at the chart, make a prediction, I don't want to read it from midnight, because then if I get it wrong, if I get it wrong, I want to get it wrong with the way I do it, not the way they want me to do it.
Yes.
So other than that, I don't have a problem with anyone doing it at midnight. And I know people who do it at midnight and have great results, better results than before they learned the Cards of Truth system.
There's also another difference, let's say, between the cards and Vedic astrology. For instance, for the Varshafal or for the solar return, for the cards, it always starts on your birthday. But sometimes for the Varshafal or the solar return, it can start one day earlier or one day later. So that's also something that people are like, why isn't exactly like that, like the Varshafal? So
yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really good question, which I've spoken really briefly with you and Levi about. We've sort of just touched on it. And that's something I want to create an option in Kala to allow us to calculate for the Varshafal day. I played with it, just manually made the calculation, played with it. The results were not promising enough that I made it a huge priority to calculate Varshafala solar returns or Cards of Truth returns based on the solar return. I think the reason is because the Cards of Truth is more a numerical system, in the sense that numerology is a part of it, in that it's the numbers of the birth date that determine that card. So a day has a solar value based on the calendar day. Okay, and that solar value is correlated to a card. So there's 52 cards in the deck. There's solar value from 1 to 52 of the cards. And when we calculate out the date, we see, oh, this has a solar value of this, therefore it's this card. So with the Varshafala, we're looking at the solar return, where it's a different calculation. But I think there might be some use for it. I don't think we would ever not want to use the birthday return, the actual day. But I can see how it could be really cool to read the Varshafala and then say, let's see what the Cards of Truth system says about this Varshafala, and have another layer of interpretation to add to the Varshafala. So it's something I still want to program, but it is a different thing. One's based on the return of the sun. The other one is based on the numerical value of the day in question, which is based on the date. And there's lots of areas for research with all this stuff, honestly. I mean, things I've thought about, but the reality is, I mean, I can tell you crazy ideas I have to research in the card system, but we don't need to drive people crazy, okay? But at my mind, if it's
I
not in a
also have some ideas.
you too, I know. If my mind's not in a rabbit hole, it's not happy, But see, the difference between Vedic astrology and the cards, and while my mind is always in the Vedic astrology rabbit hole trying to figure something out, because there's so much stuff in Vedic astrology that doesn't work as good as we are expecting it to, that
True.
needs refinement, that we have to deeply think about. Maybe we can squeeze a few more percents out of the card system if we go down some card rabbit hole. But the reality is, it's working so damn good.
Yes.
It's not a priority. It's working so good as it is that maybe even if we can't perfect it, it's not as critically as important as figuring out what's truly the right Ayanamsha, right?
Yes, that is.
You know what I mean? It's like, all right, there's 40 Ayanamshas. Which one should I use? Now that is a rabbit hole that needs to be gone down, that needs to be resolved definitively. But we don't need these other rabbit holes that my mind has about the cards. Maybe they'll work, but it's already working so good.
That's true.
Right now, Vedic astrology rabbit hole. So you understand. So the Varshafala thing is just, again, one of those. I played with it. I did notice like immediately after a few hours that it was like really showing like promise. Maybe if I had a program, I could look at more and start showing promise. But again, the cards as it is working so damn good. Every time I try to goof and play with it and try to, well, maybe this will refine it. It's just, it doesn't work better. And
Yes,
so it's solid as is. You don't need to question it. You just have to use it and be amazed at the results you get. But do
exactly.
question it. Someone needs to go down those rabbit holes someday.
I have another question that people sometimes ask me that come from tarot or other system, and some of them, like on my videos, aggressively comment that I'm spreading misinformation, and actually the spades is the air element.
Mhm.
So I tell them, if you want to use the spades as air element, you can feel free to do that. I have my reasoning why I do that, and I can explain, but if you want to do that, please. I don't know if there was someone who wrote like the Ten Commandments like thousands of years ago that the spades is the air element. I mean,
No.
people seem to feel very strongly about the elements in tarot or
Mhm.
different systems.
The,
So yeah.
yeah, one of the probably the thing that needs to be cleared up with the cards more than the one single rabbit hole that needs to be gone down and clarified is the elements related to the cards. And
Hmm.
um, the reality is that if you read the card books, like I have some old respected card books up there. That's why I think I keep them right above me, those card books. And I mean, some of these card books I spent a few $100s for. They're very rare, esteemed card books that were really hard to find used. And when I found them, they were expensive. And these, none of the books agree on the element. There is
Yes.
simply no agreement. So you can pick whatever element you want for any suit, and you're going to find a book that validates that. So what that means is it hasn't, and these are all esteemed card readers disagreeing.
Yes.
Okay, so I've heard diamond is fire because diamonds have fire, right? They glint, they have fire.
They're red, so they must be fire.
They must be, yeah. So it's like, yeah, they're red, so they must be fire. So there's good reasons for every suit being a certain element. But the
Yes.
reality is, the reason there's so many people doing great card readings with different ideas of the elements is because the way they're using their elements are just not that important.
Exactly.
It's not important enough to really affect their interpretation because they have a specific interpretation for this card. And if they say this card is now this element, it's not really changing the interpretation. Okay.
Exactly. It's
And
just
so
the
it doesn't
label
really
they put
matter.
on it because the interpretation of the suits is pretty much the same, but people put like a different label element on it. Even though, hearts are warm and some say they're fire because they're warm. Okay,
Mhm.
but they can also be water because they're enveloping. So it doesn't matter as long as you know the principle behind it, you can call it this or that.
Exactly. And really, the best way I think to understand the meanings of the cards is to see them for what they are, which is symbols in nature, as I teach
Yes.
in the courses, and I'm sure you'll touch on. So
Yeah.
um, that's the foundation of the cards. Now, as far as the elements, if we were really solid in our elemental usage, like if we had agreement on which element is which suit, we would be doing more with the elements. Now, do we absolutely need to? Not necessarily because we're already doing so much with the cards because they're in on the detail level. But on a basic level of understanding the person, if we knew the elements and if we were confident of the elements, we would find deeper ways to use them. Okay. But if so let's say everyone out there, me included, has one element wrong. Say no one's got it right yet. Let's just say that, okay, hypothetically. Then that one element that's wrong is going to keep people from finding the ways to use the elements on a deeper level of a person's foundation. Okay. Now, with that said, one of the things I've been experimenting with is the elements relevant to diseases. And, because we have the whole Chinese medicine concept of the 5 elements and how those elements lead to certain kinds of diseases, certain kind of imbalanced emotions. So now we have something that's really concrete, your imbalanced emotions. All right. And we can look at that and we should be able to see that with the elements. And so I've got some theories I've been testing on that to help understand the structure of the elements more on something that is very useful. That's a very elementally centered technique. It's a very elementally centered technique to say you have fears because this element is imbalanced, or to say, you're killing yourself with grief because this element is imbalanced, the air element. So knowing that, yes, we can, and someone has some basic understanding of Chinese medicine, a person could dive into the elements more. And again, that's something I've been worked on. Actually, I worked on that years ago, and I haven't even bothered teaching it because I've been so busy with other things. But it's something I want to do in the future, is more a medical element cards course. So that's something I hope to get to before they bury me one day. So, but generally speaking, for the predictions we're making and the detailed predictions, doesn't matter what element you call the card. I mean, I really rarely remember doing a card reading and saying, oh, you're in the
Yes.
6 of spades, and the spades is this element.
Yes. I mean, what is the point? I mean, what does it give to the person to know that element? Like, it has to be a practical outcome. Like, the element doesn't.
Exactly. Because I just jump right into the meat of the 6 of spades, because the 6 of spades is this particular experience and activity, and that's what they need to know.
Yes.
Doesn't matter what element might cause it. We have all this detail beyond the element. But see, at the same time, there is a use for it. It's also with astrology. We have these 4 elements of the signs and 5 elements of the planets. To do Chinese medicine health concepts, we need a 5-element system.
Yes.
So in astrology, if we look at Aries and we say it's a fire sign, no, we can't use that in the concept of the 5 elements and health. Because when we say Aries is a fire sign, we're dealing with Aries not on an energetic level like the Chinese system does. We're dealing with Aries as on a concrete level, meaning Aries actually rules places that are hot, concretely hot places. It doesn't mean energetic is necessarily going to be fire, okay? Because that's the 5 elements of the planets, and the planets show the subtle energy of the primordial elements, and these are called the Pancha Tattvas. The Pancha Tattvas, the Tattvas are the fine elements. So they go beyond chemistry, they go beyond the periodic table. But the signs of the zodiac, they're about the periodic table. They're about jumping into a pool of water, things like that. So we have to understand in what context we're using the 5 elements. So in the card system, we have planets, we have 4 suits, right? We also have the background of the card, which is a very important part. So there's some hints for people who want to go down a rabbit hole. So we actually
the overlying and the underlying, that's a big rabbit hole to go into.
Yeah, and then we have underlying and overlying, which I promise to do a more involved class on that. But again, the system's working so great. I'm like, why do I want to make it more complicated when people are having such good results? One of the things I've noticed with teaching over the years is, I remember once I taught this really basic prediction class back in 2006 or 2007, something like that. And everyone had homework. And the homework was, here's a chart, predict what happened. So we're talking hard homework, not, okay, what's the answer to this question, but tell me what happened. Everyone got 9 out of 10 of those predictions right.
Wow.
I was like stunned. I was like, holy shit, this really works. These people are just learning this and they're giving the right answers consistently, not one of them and the rest failing. The whole class is consistently giving the right prediction. So then after that was the intro basic class, right? And then the
Mm-hmm.
next course to follow was the advanced course. Now in the advanced course, I brought in all the cool mathematical tables, all the subtle calculations. No one even nailed 50% of the predictions in that class. It was like 40%. I mean, it was a disaster, because that extra level of complexity, all it did was confuse the people and make them not be able to see the answer that was right in front of them.
Overthink, overthink.
If you overthink, it's all over.
Yes.
Thinking is what you do before the reading. you know, so think is what you do when you say, let me think about what time I can do this. And that's the
Yeah.
only time you should think with your clients. The rest of the time, it has to be done with your whole self, not just your brain. And
Mm-hmm.
so if I make the homework where I put the person into too much of a thinking mode, yeah, they're going to not get as good as scores. So I learned that with that course. And so it comes again, underline, overline. Yeah, we could get into it more, but people are having such fantastic results. I'm going to teach it, but it's not the biggest priority for me to get out there. You have to know this because if you don't, you will not do a great job. Whereas
Yeah.
Vedic astrology, there's 10 juicy things that I can say that about, that as soon as I get ready, I will teach those things. And it's going to change your world when it comes to astrology. Whereas this is not going to make your card reading really maybe any better. And it might make it worse if you don't embrace it and absorb it fully. So every level of complexity
Usually,
we add, we have to embrace it with more, or else there's more to embrace. And if it's not in our body, we can't do it.
mhm.
If it's just in our heads, it will just trip over.
Yeah, usually during a reading, I don't have time to go into the overlying, underlying, but if I do during my classes just to see, it's like what leads to that situation and how that situation develops. That's how I look at it in the year spread. So that's how I look at it, but the most important thing is the main card. Like that's the main event, the concrete result, and the rest is just like a background and overground information. So just focus on the big picture.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really interesting. It's interesting to look at those cards from the evolutionary perspective, where
Yes,
you're moving
yes.
through
For your
life.
natal spread, yes, it's like
Exactly.
from where you're going. But in the year
Where you're
spread,
coming. But what matters right now, what mostly matters is right now, the moment of time you're in now,
yes,
which is with now. The overlaying cards have already resolved. One has resolved, the other one's going to. The other one's going to manifest. And it'll be interesting. Oh, the reason you're like this now is because this always
hmm
happens to your type because of this card here, this underliner or this overlaying card. But
hmm
the reality is that's interesting, but it's not usually what a person needs to get through the chapter they're currently on. And in a reading, it's hard just to cover that chapter when they usually come, because usually people have in very intense chapters when they come to a reader.
yeah.
So
These overlying, underlying cards, if like you told them everything and then there's time and then, okay, what more to ask? Oh, what's that there? What, so it's like
yeah,
that.
there's more to ask, but again, it hasn't helped me use the cards better or do a better job. So I
Yes.
haven't prioritized teaching that stuff. Anytime I something with the cards, like I think one of the last cards courses I did was concrete and practical meanings of cards. I was like, okay, I need to get something really focused on these concrete things. This is really important. This is really going to help everyone. It's really going to make a difference. And so I jumped to it and I did. It was a priority. These other things, yeah, I want to do them. I want to talk about them more, teach them more, but they're not priorities. So
hmm
yeah, so yeah, it's true. So in cards, the beauty of it, everything that you need to learn in cards, you'll learn in kindergarten. You'll learn in the basic course. You really
Yes.
everything you learn after that, and that's of course you want to learn compatibility, a whole not, a whole never a different use of it. But
Yeah.
everything you learn after cards kindergarten is not gonna it's not gonna make a huge difference in your life. You know how to read from kindergarten, and that's a huge difference in everyone's life. You're going to learn how to read the cards correctly, and it's going to work. And yeah, then you can learn to read, you maybe can learn a few more words, but it's not going to matter much, you know? So,
Well, you can
all
learn
right.
a few more languages.
Yeah, you can even learn a few languages and go crazy, you know?
Yes,
But again, you have to think in all those languages, otherwise they're not very useful, right?
true.
So, all right, well, I'm excited for you, and I hope people enjoy your course and get a lot out of it. And really, we need more people embracing the cards because it is the best system out there in the
Yes,
context of I'm a normal person and I don't want to live in a cave and study astrology and ignore my whole world, my whole life. But actually, I have a life that's not astrology, but I love the occult. And for every person who feels like that, or I have some questions, I want to get that more understanding, cards is the way to go.
yes.
Okay, great to see you again.
Thank you very much, Ernst. So check out my website if you're interested in courses or readings. We start on March 10, but we can do other courses later.